Let's not defer this decision any further. We can do that. And instead of encouraging any type of trade war or sanctions with Brazil, we should move forward in reforming the cotton subsidy program starting tonight. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time and ask my colleagues to support this amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Does any member seek time in opposition to the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Texas.
I rise in opposition to the amendment. Request strike last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleague is very passionate, but he's also very wrong. Mr. Chairman, this money does not go to Brazilian farmers. That's illegal for us to do that. What it does do, it does go to an institute that promotes Brazilian agricultural production. It may be a fine line to distinguish there, but it's inflammatory to say it's going to Brazilian farmers that we're doing that, and he knows it, and it is wrong, but it is a payment. It's a payment negotiated by the Obama administration in reaction to a loss at the WTO in order to buy time so that a trade war with our 10th largest trading partner in the world doesn't erupt that has absolutely nothing to do with ag production. The trade war that is being prevented, over $800 million worth of exports to Brazil, protects a broad variety of non-agricultural industries in this agreement. This buys us time until the 2012 Farm Bill can get done. We cannot tonight, nor should we tonight, delve into a very complicated farm safety net program that has worked well for the American people. It goes with it's unquestioned that the American people enjoy the safest, most abundant, and cheapest food and fiber source in the world, in the developed countries. And we do that because of the hard work, sweat equity, and risk-taking of the American ag producer. They rely, in turn, on a safety net that is relatively complicated and interwoven across a bunch of things that make it help. In 2012, much to the budget that we did pass says that the Farm Bill will be written in 2012. I understand my colleague's disdain for the process of the Agriculture Committee. He doesn't like the Agriculture Committee, doesn't like the work product that we come out with, but that's the group that knows the most about the process of the safety net. Doing this, what the gentleman would like to do tonight, would disrupt that trade agreement, undercut the U.S. Trade Representative and his ability to negotiate around the world because he's negotiating with a group who won't stick by their word. The 2008 Farm Bill put in place a 5-year contract, 5-year agreement with the American ag producers, goes to the 2012 Farm Bill, 2012 crop year, and we ought to stand behind it and defeat this amendment. So the money does not go to farmers. It does protect $800 million a year in exports of non-agricultural exports that are imported to this country, including again actual intellectual property rights that would be abrogated if we back out on this deal that we've made with Brazil. So with that, I respectfully request my colleagues to oppose the kind amendment as being wrong-headed tonight. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I listened to my good friend from Texas talk about deferring yet again to the Ag Committee, that somehow this payment goes to the Brazilian cotton industry and not to the cotton farmers, a distinction without a difference, I would suggest. I rise in support of my colleague from Wisconsin in this proposal. I've been in this Congress having watched 3 Farm Bill reauthorizations, and each time we find that there is expression on the floor of this chamber for actual reform. We've asked for limitations. We are told, well, we just don't, the floor doesn't understand it. It's too complicated. Well, it is complicated and twisted because this is an effort to try, through the complexity, to layer efforts here that cheat the American consumer, that hurt the environment, and pose serious problems for international trade. And my friend from Wisconsin is correct. We were talking about this in the last Farm Bill, and we got our comeuppance. But instead of responding responsibly and reducing or eliminating the illegal cotton subsidies, we're shoving upwards of $500 million to the Brazilian cotton industry, and I'll be prepared to argue benefits cotton farmers. So we're subsidizing 2 countries because we fail to reach our responsibilities now. I sincerely think this is wrong. I think $147 million could go a long way towards helping the part of American agriculture that grows food that we categorize as specialty crops, who are dramatically shortchanged. And I would like to yield the remainder of my time, if I could, to my good friend from Wisconsin, the sponsor of this amendment.
Well, I thank my good friend from Oregon for his support of the amendment and for his support throughout the years in trying to lead the effort for meaningful Farm Bill reform. Now, Mr. Chairman, there is another solution to this that's going to be offered by our good friend and colleague from Arizona in just a little bit, Mr. Flake. He goes to the heart of the WTO decision to find out what changes we should be making in the cotton subsidy program to get out from under the thumb of Brazil. And I'm going to support that amendment, and I hope my colleagues support his amendment as well, because that is the ultimate solution to this, instead of just cutting off the funding to Brazil right now, but coming up with the cotton subsidy reform. Now, let's remember the context in which we find ourselves this evening. Cotton payments are almost at a world record high price right now, and yet these subsidies are still going out. There's just very little relationship right now with a lot of the subsidies under Title I to the grain producers and cotton producers of our country. And at a time of tough budgets, when everyone else is being asked to take a haircut, whether you're a supporter of conservation programs or vital nutrition programs for our children and seniors, for us to not even look and consider the Title I programs in the context of this agricultural appropriation, it's beyond the pale. There's just no justification to it. And these programs are outdated. They are impossible to justify with the American taxpayer, especially with the deficit reduction that all of us are interested in participating in this year. This is a small but I think significant step down the road of reform with the Farm Bill, finding savings that can be applied to either other programs or for deficit reduction. And that's why I commend my colleague from Arizona for the amendment he's about to offer. But my friend from Oregon, too, will have some important amendments for us to consider. A payment limitation, limiting the overall amount of subsidies that go to our producers. And, folks, this is going to agribusiness, many of whom have mailing addresses in Manhattan, in Chicago, in San Francisco. These aren't even family farmers working the land. And they're some of the primary recipients of these agriculture subsidies. Mr. Blumenauer's amendments address that, along with Mr. Flake's AGI cutoff at $250,000 a year of AGI. That's profit. I mean, if you're an entity making a profit of over $250,000 a year, should you really still be receiving taxpayer subsidies for the business that you're running? I think not. And we'll have another opportunity to consider that later tonight. So I appreciate my gentleman yielding me this time and further explaining what this amendment is all about. And if we are serious about deficit reduction, if we are serious about reining in some of the programs that are tough to justify, then we should be serious about supporting this amendment tonight. And I'm happy to yield back.
And, Mr. Chair, on that note, I, too, commend what my friend from Wisconsin is doing. I look forward to the comments from my friend from Arizona. If we're serious about reform and saving money, it's time to move in this area. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the kind amendment. I commend the gentleman from Wisconsin for offering this. You know, we've heard here that we need this program to make us trade compliant. Now, many of us warned when we did the last Farm Bill that if we did this level of subsidies, that it would run afoul of our trade agreements. Yet we plowed ahead and did it anyway. And then, April of last year is when our farm programs, which on their best day are out of step with reality, moved into the realm of the absurd. When we hatched a program to actually fund an institute in Brazil to fund the cotton industry there, to continue or to start subsidizing the Brazilians so that we could continue to subsidize our own farmers. Is that not absurd? Why are we continuing to do this? It was raised before that we've got to do this to make us trade compliant now, or tariffs might be imposed. That is true, but I offered an amendment in the committee earlier on that would have taken money from the direct payments that we currently pay to cotton farmers and paid off the Brazilians with that money, rather than raid the Treasury and to raid the taxpayers once again. And guess what? That passed in committee but was stricken when it came to the floor. So when you hear all this rhetoric about, hey, we want to be trade compliant, we could have done that. We could have simply allowed that amendment to stick in the bill, and then this would have been trade compliant. but the Brazilians would have been paid off not with new taxpayer money, but with the money that is making us non-trade compliant in the first place. So don't believe what you're hearing about we just want to be trade compliant. That's what this is about. We offered an alternative to that, and it was rejected. And so here we are asking the taxpayers to once again this year $147 million to the Brazilians to make us trade compliant. We've got to stop this. Nobody really believes that we're going to do a farm bill this year. Nobody really believes we're going to do one next year. And so we're going to be doing this year after year after year. So that means that we're going to continue to do this unless we stop it. I can tell you, if we pass the kind amendment tonight, we'll be back and we'll reform our cotton subsidies in a way that will make us trade compliant. We'll go back and accept the flake amendment that passed in the Appropriations Committee that perhaps took the money from the cotton program. We don't need to continue to ask the taxpayers to pay off the Brazilians so that we can continue out-of-step subsidies to our own farmers. And that's what this amendment is about. I commend the gentleman for offering it, and I would yield some time to the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman yielding, and I appreciate his support of this amendment, the leadership that he's shown, not only on committee, but throughout the years when it comes to sensible farm bill reform. And the easiest way for us to come into trade compliance isn't by bribing the Brazilian government to get them to not enforce the sanctions that it can now under WTO. It's fixing this domestic program and doing it now, rather than waiting years from now, as my colleague just pointed out, for the next farm bill. I know this isn't easy, and I know the committee wrestles with a lot of different constituent. I used to serve on the committee. I'm not asking anyone here tonight to do anything differently than what I'm asking my producers to do in my district of Wisconsin and in my state, and that's taking a haircut. You know, the reforms that I've been proposing through a year would require my district to take a haircut on these agriculture subsidies. And it's not always easy standing up to groups that are getting something from the government and saying we can't afford it, nor can we justify it with the market and with the deficits. But that is what it's going to take for this body to come together if we are going to be serious about deficit reduction and getting the spending under control. And I know that the Agriculture Committee has their hands full, and I know they'd rather just defer this decision until the next farm bill and put it off. But we don't know when that's going to be, but the thing we do know for certain is there's $147 million going out the door every year right now that we can stop doing tonight with the passage of this amendment. And I thank the gentleman for yielding.
I thank the gentleman, and I just want to make the point that everybody needs to take a haircut here. If we're going to get this debt and deficit under control, we shouldn't ask the taxpayers once again to pay off the Brazilians so we can continue out-of-step subsidies to our own farmers. We have a cotton industry in Arizona. They may take a hit because of this. But everybody has to take a haircut. Everybody has to contribute here to getting this deficit and this debt under control. And if we can't start with a program like this, I don't know where we'll start. After this amendment, I plan to offer an amendment that will go after the programs that actually make us non-trade compliant. I'll be glad to give up on that amendment, not offer it at all, if this amendment is allowed to pass. But if that is called for the noes, then I plan to offer the amendment after this. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purposes, the gentleman from Minnesota rise.
Chairman, I strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, you know, this is kind of a surreal debate because I don't think we're talking about the real issue here. You know, the cotton program isn't perfect. A lot of the programs that we have in the Agriculture Committee aren't perfect. Freedom to Farm that was passed in '96, it got us into some of these problems. I opposed. It saved a little bit of money, and then we ended up spending 10 times as much money bailing people out when it collapsed. You know, so you got to be careful what you're doing. But the problem here is, you know, we're arguing about something that no longer exists. This program that they sued us under no longer exists. We have fixed it 2 or 3 times. We tried to address this. It was never good enough for the Brazilians, but we made some changes, and we made some more changes, and we made some more changes in the 2008 Farm Bill. Still not good enough for them. You know, cotton went through some very difficult times. I don't have any cotton in my district. This is not a parochial issue for me, but if they wouldn't have had that safety net, we'd have been out of the cotton business. Well, what was going on at the same time? We had Brazil using government money to increase cotton production in Brazil. You know, and this is something that isn't considered in the WTO, because we are such geniuses that we agreed to this agreement that tied our hands and gave our competitors the ability to eat our lunch. And that's what's going on. You know, JBS that just took over a big part of the livestock industry in this country is financed by the Brazilian government. They own 30% of JBS. Nobody complains about that. You know, the Brazilian government created most of this competition that collapsed the cotton prices worldwide. And then we agreed to go into the, let China into the WTO, and they promised that they weren't going to go into cotton production, and and we shipped our textile market to China, and collapsed all of our textile industry. And what happened? They increased production like crazy. India increased production like crazy. Our cotton prices went down below the cost of production because of these trade agreements that we got involved in. But the way they're structured, there's nothing we can do about it, but they're going to sue us over a little Step 2 program that we now got rid of, trying to keep our people in business. Now, if you want to ship the whole cotton industry to Brazil and China and India, you're on a good start to do that. And if you keep on this road, you're going to ship the rest of agriculture to these so-called developing nations that are not developing nations. If you've been to Brazil in agriculture, they are anything but a developing nation, but they're protected under the rules that we agreed to in this WTO deal. So is this a perfect solution? No. But we couldn't get the Brazilians to honestly sit down and work this out because they don't want to. They're trying to use this for other reasons, for other advantages in these trade negotiations and so forth. And I don't think we could ever do anything to satisfy them. So there's more to this than people are talking about here. This is not about saving money. This is about making sure that we can have a safety net in this country so we can maintain production agriculture in the United States and not ship it all to other countries and not get dependent on foreign countries for our food like we've become dependent on foreign countries for our energy. That'd be the worst thing that could happen to us. So I just hope people understand all of the different ramifications. This isn't a perfect deal, but for the time being, it's probably the best solution that we can come up with. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For purposes, gentleman from Oklahoma rise.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the prerequisite number of words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to this amendment. And I want to return for a moment, I think, to the focus of the discussion. And I want to be absolutely clear. If this amendment passes, it could incite a trade war. Brazil could immediately impose $800 million in retaliatory tariffs on a variety of U.S. goods. I promise you, they won't retaliate against U.S. agricultural products. They'll go after ag chemicals and biotechnology products, and they'll go after veterinary medicines and software and books and music and films. They'll go at everybody outside of production agriculture with their $800 billion in retaliatory tariffs. Now, we can debate how we got here, and my colleague, the ranking member, gave a very good history of what led us to this point. But this amendment right here, right now, would expose the U.S. to job-killing sanctions on goods valued at $800 million. In 2010, the Obama administration finalized a framework agreement with Brazil that was a critical step in resolving this dispute about the U.S. upland cotton program and export credits. And yes, under the agreement, Brazil agreed to delay trade sanctions, trade retaliation, until the 2012 Farm Bill was developed and put together. This amendment would circumvent the legislative process in what can only be described as a haphazard way. That should be a relic of the past. This amendment is an attempt to circumvent regular order, the democratic policy process, by changing policy on an appropriation bill. Now, I can assure you, I plan, and we will have a full and open process when we start the Farm Bill debate. We'll debate the relevant issues dealt with in this amendment. And on that note, I would serve a notice for record
that next week we plan to start the process of conducting an audit of all farm programs. This audit is just the beginning of the comprehensive and transparent process we'll use to draft the 2012 Farm Bill. Policy changes will be considered carefully with input from industry stakeholders and constituents, and within the larger context of improving the competitiveness and long productivity of American agriculture. Let's not incite a trade war. Let's return to regular order. And if nothing else, my friends, remember, this bill is 13% lower than the previous spending bill. This takes us almost back in the Appropriations bill, almost back to 2006. We are giving our share in this appropriations process. And everyone in this room knows that whether it's the regular farm bill next summer or if we have some grandiose understanding on the national debt ceiling and spending the deficit, we could well have a farm bill dramatically quicker than next summer. And we'll have a farm bill that reflects a dramatic reduction in resources compared to past farm bills. Let the Ag Committee, in regular order, craft the policy, and then when we bring it to the floor, all of our friends, expert ag economists, we all may be together, you'll have your shot, as you've had before. But please, don't incite a trade war. Please, don't ignore the regular order of appropriation and authorization. Please, be rational in what you do. We've got tough decisions ahead of us. Colin and I and the rest of the committee, we know that. We're going to do what we have to do. But let us do it in regular order, not in this fashion.
So he goes.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Move to strike the requisite words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for allowing that. Let me just say this. Georgia is the second largest cotton-producing state. It accounts for approximately 10% of the U.S. cotton production. In 2011, Georgia farmers intend to plant almost 1.5 million acres of cotton. The average farm gate value is more than $600 million. There are approximately 2,800 businesses directly involved in the production, processing, and distribution of cotton. Accounting for the broader economic effects, the Georgia cotton industry supports more than 46,000 jobs, and it generates economic activity of approximately $11 billion. Now, the proponents of these amendments target provisions in the cotton programs that are at the center of a WTO trade case which Brazil has against the United States. The U.S. and the Brazilian governments have scheduled a series of consultations designed to identify the modifications in policy that will resolve the case. The intention is to reach agreement on carefully thought out provisions that can be included in the 2012 Farm Bill. These hastily drafted amendments are not guaranteed to resolve the dispute. One, since the U.S.-Brazil consultations have not resulted in any specific agreement, and two, since these approaches will certainly undermine the future discussions as the two countries attempt to reach a final resolution that's fair and that is reasonable. The amendments target cotton farmers in an effort to reduce government spending. The 2008 Farm Bill, including the cotton provisions, was fully paid for, offset, and did not add one single dime to the deficit. They cite the years in which the government support for cotton was historically high, but they ignore the years when the support actually is at historic lows. We need to maintain the safety net so that it's there when it's needed, but not utilized, as it hasn't been recently, when it's not needed. Farmers understand that the current budget pressures, they understand that very well, but they expect to be a part of a debate involving all of the agricultural stakeholders and not be singled out for ad hoc budget reductions with hasty policy decisions. These proposed amendments would nullify the basic component of cotton policy. If these amendments are enacted, they would take effect October 1st, and as a result, USDA would have to change the cotton program rules in the middle of the marketing year and change them back effective October 1st, 2012. This would undermine the confidence in commodity programs, especially among agricultural lenders. This would compromise our agriculture policy, a policy that has been vetted very carefully by our authorizing committees and relied upon by our growers and our lenders in making their business decisions going into 2012. The reauthorization of the Farm Bill in 2012 is the proper forum to debate the cotton agriculture policy, not here on this appropriations bill. We have got to do what is right in regular order. This is not the time, it's not the place, and what we're doing tonight, if they go forward with this, is pulling the rug out from under our cotton farmers and our agriculture when they have made plans through, financial plans, through 2012. It is unfair, it's not right, and we should not do it. And I urge my colleagues to reject these amendments. They are ill-advised.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'd like to speak in opposition to this. We have really, the ranking member gives a great history lesson on how this comes out. The previous Farm Bill, passed primarily Congress controlled by your side of the aisle, created a situation with our cotton subsidies, caused a problem with Brazil, and we are trying to work it out. My colleagues on this side of the aisle and many of the colleagues on the other side of the aisle are also concerned that this government as a whole, through the regulatory process, pick the regulatory agency, is making it very difficult and unpredictable for businesses by changing the regulatory environment. Our businesses are holding back, not investing, not creating jobs. Well, we're about to do the same thing ourselves right here with this amendment by yanking the rug out from under our cotton farmers who have built their businesses, made their plans based on the promise of the last Farm Bill. You know, I love to save money for this government. I'm none too happy to see this money going to Brazil, but we basically lost a lawsuit and we're having to pay the damages, and we're going to fix it in the regular order without yanking the rug out from under the farmers who are the backbone of this country by changing the rules in the middle of the game. Give us until next year to get that Farm Bill out, and we will address it. Even though it didn't rise to the point of order, this really does rise, in my opinion, to the level of legislating within an appropriations bill. You know, I don't like spending the money, I don't like sending it offshore, but we cannot change the rules in the middle of the game. We cannot move the goalpost for our farmers, many of whom are small private farmers who have built their future, taken out loans, decided to buy more land, decided to buy more equipment, based all their business decisions on the promise that this government made to them in the last Farm Bill. And changing the rules at this point is absolutely wrong, and I encourage my friends and my colleagues to vote against this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Does the gentleman move to strike the last word?
I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The gentleman that preceded me said we lost the lawsuit. We didn't lose the lawsuit. If he knows anything about the WTO dispute resolution process, no conflict of interest, no open litigation, no legal proceeding as we in the United States of America understand it, a closed group with no conflict of interest rules that makes rulings. And they have decided that we, under this failed trade policy, should pay tribute more than we paid to the Barbary pirates, $147,300,000 a year to the government of Brazil, so we can subsidize our cotton farmers. Now, you go home and explain that to your constituents. We'll borrow $147,300,000 from China, and we'll send it to Brazil so we can subsidize our cotton farmers. What is this all about? It is about a totally failed trade policy. And at some point, this Congress has to take a stand. Ron Paul and I, a number of years ago, 3 years ago, we get to do it once every 5 years, offered an amendment to withdraw the United States of America from the WTO. That'll come up soon. I hope you'll all support it. It is something that binds us and is destroying our industries, our farmers, and everything else that's great about this country. I voted against the WTO. This isn't about so much as a failed farm policy or farm bill, as a gentleman outlined. It's about totally failed trade policies. Other countries want to protect their agricultural interests. They want to feed their own people. They don't want to import polluted food from China. We've opened up our country to polluted food and goods from China and Brazil and every place else in the world with the WTO and these trade agreements. They don't observe them. We go and we lose this dispute and say, oh, we've got no choice but to pay. We have a choice. Let's not pay. We're not going to pay the tribute. We're not going to borrow the money from China. We're not going to send it to Brazil. Let's see what they do next. And maybe we can blow up this thing called the WTO and get back to something that protects our national interests. With that, I yield to the gentleman from Wisconsin.
I thank the gentleman for his comments in support of this amendment. And just one final point to my colleagues who have been supportive of trade agreements in the past. Let's be honest with ourselves. If we're going to be a part of this WTO organization to establish rules of trade across borders, then let's not turn our back on an adverse decision that affects us. Let's instead comply and bring the cotton subsidy program into compliance. That is the answer to this. And let's end this nonsense of stacking subsidy program on top of subsidy program to just buy off and blackmail other governments who have a WTO decision in their hands. And I cannot believe that this evening, when we're asking for huge, unprecedented cuts in conservation programs that will affect thousands of farmers throughout the country, and unprecedented cuts with nutrition programs that will affect thousands of low-income families with their children and seniors, saying, tough luck, we're operating under tough budget times, you're just going to have to do without. When it comes to a simple amendment like this, to save $147 million a year to bribe Brazil cotton producers, and an unwillingness to go into the Title I subsidy programs for cost savings, then what the heck are we doing around here? And it's just beyond the pale that we're willing to take the deep cuts, and the chairman of the Agriculture Committee claimed 12% cut in the Farm Bill, but he didn't say where those cuts were coming from. I'll tell you where it's not coming from. It's not coming from these subsidy programs. It's not coming from the cotton subsidy program that's gotten us into this problem. A handful of powerful cotton families are holding this institution hostage in order to maintain these subsidy programs that have benefited them for too long. Talk about benefiting the few at the expense of the many. This is the classic example of this agricultural appropriation bill before us this evening. We can do a heck of a lot better, and I'd be happy to yield back.
Yeah, I'd reclaim my time and say we may have some differences over the underlying trade agreement and the mandates and the process which got it to this point. But I agree, subsidies or bribes on top of subsidies is insane in these tough budget times. And I would just note that we're going to be confronted very soon with another limitation amendment on another bill where we're going to have a choice. We're going to abandon the American trucking industry to Mexico, who is, again, exacting tribute from the U.S. $4 billion a year worth of tariffs to try and drive our companies south of the border to use Mexican drivers. So time and time again, these trade agreements are failing us. I think it's bigger than the problem of the subsidies in the Farm Bill. And this Congress needs to pay attention. One way or another, we're going to either get real about our deficits and what's really essential to the American people, feeding our people, clothing our people, and putting American people to work, or we're going to abandon ourselves to this failed notion of the WTO and other trade agreements. With that, I yield back to Valentine.
The gentleman yields back. The question on the amendment. For the purpose of the gentleman from Texas, rise.
Seek to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
You know, the world has changed. It's not enough to simply buy American anymore. We have to sell American. We have to sell our American agriculture products, our technology products, and services all throughout the world. But oftentimes, when we compete, we find much of the world is tilted against us. Other countries cut agreements to make it tough for us to sell. That's why we are involved in the World Trade Organization, to insist that other countries play by the rules. But that means America has to play by the rules as well. We lost this case in the WTO, so the question today isn't about cotton subsidies or even saving money. It's about the smart way to address this issue that protects American jobs. I am very sympathetic to this amendment. Paying Brazil nearly $12 million a month is not the right way to resolve this issue, and I agree with that. The question, in fact, America should simply live up to its WTO obligations and insist that others do the same as well. The settlement that's in place today is necessary to prevent Brazil from imposing almost $1 billion of new tariffs, new taxes on American products when we try to sell them into Brazil. And it's not just agriculture products. As you heard Chairman Frank Lucas talk, he made the point that not only can Brazil penalize our ag products, they can tax and tariff a broad range of products, especially America's innovation economy. So in your state, if you have companies that produce pharmaceuticals, medical devices, business software, technology, anything in the innovation sector of America, your companies and your workers face the loss of jobs and loss of product sales because of this issue. So the smart way to handle this is to deal with this not only in the Farm Bill, but at the WTO today, insisting that as we end these cotton subsidies, other countries end their agricultural subsidies as well. That is the smart way to resolve this issue that doesn't hurt America in jobs, in fact protects our American intellectual property rights in Brazil and other countries. This is an issue of doing it the smart way. I oppose this amendment. I urge our colleagues to continue to work together to resolve this issue in a smart way for our economy and a smart way for our jobs. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman,
the amendment is not agreed to.
On that, I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote has been requested. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin will be opposed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio arise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, a few moments ago, my friend from California had an amendment that she did withdraw that really wanted to codify into law the USDA's rules regarding the school lunch program. And while I won't go into the lengthy reasons why it's the wrong way to go for nutrition, not just the cost that it bears to the schools, but also to the fact that the USDA was recommending reducing the consumption of potatoes, corn, peas, and lima beans to just 1 serving a week, which, believe me, I was shocked. But it wasn't just myself that had this reaction. It was also the California Fruit Growers Association. It was the National School the National School Board Association. It was the Council of the Great City Schools that wrote a letter, and that's why I and 40 other colleagues wrote to Mr. Vilsack of the U.S. Department of Agriculture in reaction to the promulgation of these rules. I would like to enter the testimony I was going to give until she withdrew the amendment, as well as these 4 letters, into the record, and I thank you.
The request will be covered under general leave. And with that, the gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the clerk's desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Dingell of Michigan. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following new section. Section, the amounts otherwise provided by this Act for departmental administration, agricultural buildings and facilities, and rental payments, administrative expenses.
The reading of the bill the amendment be dispensed with.
Is there an objection? No objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this is a good amendment. At a time when 30 people have been grossly sickened and died in Germany, and 3,000 have been sickened, we are cutting Food and Drugs Enforcement budget. The legislation would cut the food safety budget of FDA by $87 million below the fiscal year 11 and $205 million below the President's fiscal year 12 request. We are witnessing now one of the deadliest E. coli breaks ever overseas in Europe, and that infection is spreading across the society of the world. My amendment has the support of the Consumers Union, Pew Charitable Trusts, Center for Science and Public Interest, U.S. PIRG, and the National Women's Health Network. Now, it is time for us to understand, every year in the United States, 3,000 Americans are killed with bad food. 128,000 are hospitalized. 48 million are made sick. We have imported food that is causing all manner of difficulty. Bad peanuts with salmonella, bad mushrooms, E. coli in peppers, melamine in dairy products, salmonella in eggs, bad shellfish and fish from China. The amendment sees to it that Food and Drug has the resources it needs to do the job to protect the American people from bad food being imported in the United States. We are able to inspect less than 1% of the food coming into the United States. This is a positive risk to American consuming public. The situation here is indefensible. The House last year passed major improvements in our food safety laws, and we saw to it we had a funding mechanism which was removed by the Senate. But without the adequate funding that this amendment would afford to our people, we will find that they are at risk of serious health dangers from bad food and from sickness that comes with those things. We are here by this amendment giving Food and Drug the resources that it needs, some $49 million, to see to it that these imported foods and other foods are safe. This is extremely important, and while you might say, well, I don't know whether it's going to affect me, somebody in this country is going to get sick because bad food came in and because it kills people when that happens. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment until we can get ourselves in a situation where we have proper and adequate funding for Food and Drug to see to it that our people are safe from imports which are causing sickness, illness, and death to the American people. The legislation, unfortunately, does cut the food safety budget, and it cuts it in ways which are threatening a piece of legislation which has strengthened Food and Drug with the support not just of farmers and consumers, but also of the food processing industry, which rallied around and supported the legislation along with consumer groups and all of the other sources in industry, recognizing we desperately need something to be done to assure that our people do not get sick and die from bad imported foods. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. I urge them to do so with vigor until such time as we can get a fee system in place which will adequately support Food and Drug and see to it that our people can sleep easily after they have a full meal, knowing that the food that they have consumed is safe. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Wyoming rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise with great temerity to oppose the amendment by the great gentleman from Michigan.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would note that over the last 2 days we have heard how ag credit and rural housing have had deep cuts in this bill, and yet now we have an amendment that would cut more from them and would impart those funds on a program that between fiscal year 2004 and the current fiscal year have experienced a net budget authority increase of $2 billion, a 121% increase. And over the same time period, direct appropriations increases of over $1 billion, or 75%. Implementation of the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2010 would require an additional $1.4 billion in new budget authority. If the President's budget request were adopted, the result would be a 156% increase for FDA since 2004. This level of spending is unsustainable. While the recommended funding level for FDA in this bill is an 11.5% decrease below the amount provided in the fiscal year 2011 continuing resolution, the subcommittee's overall allocation was reduced by 13.4%. Hence, this program suffered a smaller reduction than other programs within the budget. Once again, with these massive increases in budget authority and in actual spending through direct appropriations over the time period 2004 and the current fiscal year, Mr. Chairman, and given the fact that Ag Credit and rural housing have already taken the types of deep cuts that are referenced in the rest of the bill, Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to defeat the amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Strike the last word, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I rise in support of the Dingell amendment to partially restore the Food and Drug Administration funding to the fiscal year agricultural appropriations bill. I listened to what my colleague said on the other side of the aisle. Fact of the matter is that today's bill slashes the FDA by $572 million, or 21% below the President's request, and by $285 million, or 12% below this year. I beg to differ with the gentlewoman that this is not the time to be cutting the FDA's budget. We've had many scares, we've had many outbreaks, we've had people die, we've had people become seriously ill. And that's why in the last Congress we passed the landmark Food Safety Act, because we wanted to have increased inspection of food manufacturing plants, increased scrutiny of imported foods, and development of the capability to more quickly respond to foodborne illnesses and minimize their impact. I don't know about you, but when I go home, I hear a great deal of concern about the quality and the safety of our food supply and our groceries. When people buy food in the supermarket, when they go and buy it at a roadside stand, they're very concerned about the quality of the food and whether they're going to get sick. That's why we passed the landmark Food Safety Act. And it's clear that we had just recently the E. coli breakout. The nation's food supply is still extremely vulnerable, and the FDA must be equipped to keep it safe. FDA has important responsibilities to protect and promote the health of the American people. To succeed in that mission, FDA must ensure the safety of not just food, but drugs and medical devices that Americans rely on every day. They don't just need to oversee the safety of the products, they also need to be involved in facilitating scientific innovations that make these products safe, effective, and more affordable. Now, these efforts are especially critical today because I believe that American competitiveness depends on our ability to innovate. To do that, we must properly fund key agencies like the FDA that are essential to assisting in the development of new drugs and devices. FDA places a high importance on promoting innovation. In fact, they are currently developing a new innovation pathway, an initiative to help promising technologies get to market. But let me share something with my colleagues. One of the FDA's senior leadership staff testified before the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee recently and assured us that these cuts would prevent such efforts from moving forward. What I'm trying to emphasize is that whether you look at it from the point of view of the food supply, whether you look at it from the point of view of innovation, to make cuts in the FDA budget simply makes no sense. It's crucial to job creation, it's crucial to people feeling safe about what they eat. And the government has to be responsible for facilitating an environment where Americans can continue to innovate. It's the key to creating new thriving industries that will produce millions of good jobs here at home and a better future for the next generation. If government abandons its role, we run the real risk of squandering too many opportunities that lead to innovative discoveries and great economic benefits. Mr. Speaker, the bottom line is the funding level put forth in today's appropriations bill is inadequate. FDA is already an underfunded agency. If we don't continue to give the FDA the resources it needs to complete its mission, they cannot support initiatives that save lives, create jobs, and these are priorities that Congress should embrace. I listened to what my colleague said on the other side of the aisle. I understand we have to be concerned about funding and budget, and we have a deficit. But you also have to figure out what's important as a priority. The American people have told us that food safety is a priority. That's why we passed this landmark bill last year. And there has to be a significant increase in funds, even in this environment, if we're going to keep the food supply safe. And if we don't do that, you know, a lot of economic activity is also going to suffer, including innovation, including what we can do for the future to keep this country competitive. So I understand what she's saying, but I also think that it is very important to restore these funds. And I want to commend my colleague, Mr. Dingell, for putting forth this amendment, and I would ask my colleagues to support the amendment. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And I stand in opposition of the amendment, but with great admiration for the author of the amendment, but still disagreement. Now, the previous speaker actually said that USDA funding has been slashed. FDA is funded both with direct appropriations and with fees. Last year, their funding level was $3.6 billion. This year, it's $3.654 billion. It's a little bit more. I'd say it's level funding, but FDA funding has not been slashed, and it's very important for us to realize that. Number two, well, let me show you something about the FDA funding history, Mr. Chairman. If you can see this chart actually goes back to 2000 and goes up to 2011. It's been nothing but a 10-year climb uphill for the FDA. And while a lot of people are saying, well, the FDA funding is slashed, there's not even a slight dip in any of this 10-year funding chart. Very important for us to realize. Now, second point, in the FDA hearing, I'm concerned about FDA's ability to do food safety and take on this big mission. And here's why. You hear the figure about 48 million foodborne illnesses, a very high number that which we're all enormously concerned about. But 20% of those illnesses are from known or specified pathogens. Nearly 60% of the illnesses from known pathogens come from norovirus. And how do we address this? Well, the CDC tells us on their March 4th memo that appropriate hand hygiene is likely the most important method to prevent norovirus infection and control emission. Reducing any norovirus present on hands is best accomplished by thorough hand washing. Now, in FDA's 630-page budget request, there's not one mention of norovirus. I believe that that's relevant. Second point, in terms of salmonella, the second highest cause of illness is salmonella. But under its authority, the existing authority before the Food Safety Modernization Act was passed by the House, FDA updated its own food safety as respects salmonella. And they're saying that according to their own press release in July of last year, that as many as 79,000 illnesses and 30 deaths due to consumption of eggs contaminated with salmonella may be avoided. That was last year. That was before a new bureaucracy. And this bureaucracy, by the way, over a 10-year period of time will cost $1.4 billion and hire 17,000 new federal employees. The third highest cause of foodborne illnesses is Clostridium. And again, in FDA's 630-page budget request, it was only mentioned once. Now, I want to say something else very important. Do we believe that McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Safeway and Kraft Food and any brand name that you think of, that these people aren't concerned about food safety? The food supply in America is very safe because the private sector self-polices because they have the highest motivation. They don't want to be sued. They don't want to go broke. They want their customers to be healthy and happy and come back and give them repeat businesses. Now, in response to the 2006 E. coli outbreak that happened in California with spinach, where 3 people died and 200 consumers got sickened, the California Leafy Green Products Handler Marketing Agreement was made. This is a private sector agreement which has done already 2,000 farm audits on a voluntary basis. Nearly 200 billion servings of lettuce and spinach and other leafy greens produced under this program have been surveyed. It is a successful private sector initiative, and those type things happen all the time in the private sector. We're blind to it. But here's some numbers from the CDC. Very important, because I think America loves to beat itself up over things all the time. CDC numbers, Mr. Chairman: 48 million foodborne illnesses reported a year, 128,000 hospitalizations, 3,000 deaths. Those numbers are very high. I'm very concerned about it. That's why we spend a lot of money already on food safety. But I also want to point out...
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I yield much time as I may consume my colleague from Georgia.
I thank the gentleman. I just want to continue with this, Mr. Chairman, that you have 311 million Americans eating 3 meals a day. That's 933 million meals eaten each day. That's nearly 1 billion food consumption events in our country, which is over 360 billion meals consumed. If you do the math going back to the 48 million foodborne illnesses, according to the USDA, our food safety rate is 99.99%. Now, I want to address the 48 million, but what I also suggest to you that we can spend 45 million more for FDA funding, we can spend 100 million more, we can spend $1 billion more, but I don't think you can increase this number of 99.99% food safety rate according to the CDC. So in these times of very tight budgets, it's very important to keep these facts in mind. I'm going to close with this statement by the Democrat Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. And this was as of yesterday. He said, with reasonable confidence, that the U.S. consumers won't be faced with the same sort of E. coli outbreak now plaguing Germany. And he goes on and explains why, with the current food safety laws in place in the current food safety funding. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman, back as well. Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I yield as much time as he shall consume to the Chairman, Mr. Dingell.
I want to thank my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee on both sides and their extraordinary staff for their courtesy to me as we have gone on through this legislation and through the discussion of this amendment. But I've listened to my Republican colleagues tell us how great we're doing. My good friend, for whom I have enormous fondness, presents us with a bunch of pictures of food. Looks great. And maybe it's safe, and maybe it's not. And he's got a bunch of numbers that he says it's 99.99% safe, and that sounds wonderful. But what are the real facts? All right. The real facts are that at the time that this cut is going into place on food and drugs budget, 3,300 people have been sickened in Germany with a particularly dangerous form of E. coli. 30 people are dead. It is spreading across the German borders into other countries. Now, how are we doing over here? Well, first of all, Food and Drug has been starved of resources for years and has not been able to provide the necessary protection to the American people from imported food which is coming in and, frankly, sickening people. Now, what is the situation? Salmonella in peanuts, bad mushrooms from China, E. coli in peppers coming in from Mexico, melamine in dairy products, kills kids, kills babies, and it causes all manner of health risks and dangers. Bad pharmaceuticals coming in. We haven't been able to get a hold of that problem yet, but I'm going to try and get a bill that will address that. And I'm going to try and see to it that we get a fee system that will enable us to not have to quarrel about these monies on the House floor. But in this country, let's look. If this is going so well and the Secretary of Agriculture is so right, and my dear friend from Georgia is correct, then there's really nothing to worry about. And I would like somebody around here to tell me what I'm then going to tell the 3,000 people who have been killed in this country by bad food every single year. And 128,000 of them are sick enough that they have to go to hospital. But on top of that, 48 million people get sick. There is no way on God's green earth, with the budget that Food and Drug has, that they can properly and adequately protect American food and to protect the American people from the dangers of bad imported food. China is the Wild West. The stuff that they're supporting to be exporting to the United States, very frankly, I'm not sure I'd feed my hogs. Now, having said these things, it's time for us to stand up to the problem and say, okay, we're going to spend the money that's necessary to keep people safe. We're talking about $49 million here. A lot of money. But how much do you think it takes to bury 3,000 Americans? Or how much does it cost to take care of 128,000 people that are hospitalized every year because of this? Or 48 million people who get sick? And mothers who lose babies and because of bad milk and things of that kind that comes in from China, where they put melamine in it to up the fictitious level of nitrogen and protein. So I beg you, let us do what is necessary to see to it Food and Drug has the funds that they need to do the job to protect the American people. I thank my good friend for yielding to me.
Yield back.